Imagine a man, someone who takes a strict, lifelong vow of poverty. Like he relies entirely on alms, literally begging for his daily bread just to survive.
Right. Every personal possession is completely stripped away.
Exactly. Yet he spends his days working with sheets of pure gold and this brilliant, incredibly expensive blue pigment.
Ground up lapis lazuli.
Yeah. I mean,
Admir-
he's a humble ascetic monk, but his bosses are the absolute wealthiest, most powerful people in the world. We're talking the Medici dynasty and 2 different popes.
It's just a staggering contradiction. You have this quiet internal devotion violently colliding with the most aggressive wealth and political power of the 15th century.
It's wild.
It really is. And this tension completely defined the life of Fra Angelico, a friar who basically accidentally became one of the most important pioneers of the early Renaissance.
And we are jumping straight into this deep dive today because his story is, well, it's so incredibly relevant right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, if you have ever struggled to balance your deepest personal values with the flashy, demanding, high-stakes realities of your career or just your boss's expectations, you are going to see yourself in this 15th century Tuscan monk.
Yeah, the parallels are definitely there.
But to understand how he ends up painting the walls of the Vatican, we have to look at how a boy named Guido di Pietro transforms into the angelic brother.
Right, so Guido was born around 1395 in the Mugello region of Tuscany. And the very first records we have of him actually show a young man already working as a painter in Florence.
Okay.
But the trajectory of his life pivots hard by 1423. That's when he leaves the secular world and joins the Dominican convent of San Domenico in Fiesole.
Wow, a complete 180.
Completely. And as was the custom, he leaves his old name behind. So Guido di Pietro becomes Fra Giovanni, though obviously we know him today by his posthumous nickname, Fra Angelico.
Right, and joining the Dominicans, I mean, that wasn't just a career change, right? It was an absolute lifestyle overhaul.
Oh, yeah. They were a mendicant order.
Meaning they didn't own property or, generate income. They survived strictly on donations from the community. So my question is, how does a beggar end up with the resources to create high-end art?
Well, his labor essentially belonged to the convent, and the convent recognized his talent immediately.
So they put him to work.
Exactly. They put him to work as a manuscript illuminator, possibly alongside his brother Benedetto, who had also joined the order.
Oh, nice. Keeping it in the family.
Right. And while Angelico's time and skill were basically free to the Dominican order, the incredibly expensive materials like the gold leaf and the pigments, those were paid for by wealthy local patrons.
I see.
Yeah, these patrons would commission prayer books or small altarpieces as acts of piety, and frankly, as public relations moves to show off their status.
You are right, because nothing says I'm devout like spending a fortune on a book.
Exactly.
But let's visualize what manuscript illumination actually entails, because it's like being a meticulous graphic designer who is forced to work strictly in thumbnails, right? But without a zoom button.
That is a great way to put it.
You are painting microscopic, exquisite scenes in the margins of prayer books, using a brush that might, I don't know, only have 2 or 3 hairs on it.
It requires an insane level of precision.
But beyond the physical challenge, what did the art actually look like at this point in history?
Well, the dominant style was late Gothic art. And if you look at a late Gothic painting today, it feels completely detached from reality.
How so?
The figures look almost like paper cutouts glued onto a sheet of gold foil. They don't have shadows. They don't have physical weight. They just appear to be hovering in a flat golden space.
Right. There is 0 sense of gravity.
None at all. But, that was entirely intentional.
Real?
Yeah. The heavy use of gold backgrounds was a theological tool. It was meant to communicate to the viewer that these saints and holy figures did not exist in our dirty physical world.
Ah, they existed in a separate dimension.
Right. An eternal heavenly dimension. Realism wasn't the goal. Projecting divine majesty was.
Okay, but spending hours a day staring closely at these flat, floating figures, I mean, that must have sparked something in him.
Oh, definitely.
Because he is in Tuscany, which means he is surrounded by the early rumblings of the Renaissance. He's seeing the work of earlier masters like Giotto, right?
Yeah, Giotto had tried to introduce a tiny bit of emotional expression a century earlier.
And Angelico starts absorbing these influences, figuring out how to push the boundaries of that flat Gothic style.
And those early experiments in Fiesole, they really laid the groundwork for a massive shift. But, staying hidden in a small Tuscan convent wasn't going to last forever.
No, of course not.
Florence was the cultural and economic capital of Europe. It was pulling all the greatest minds into its orbit. So in 1436, Angelico and a group of friars moved to a newly built convent in Florence called San Marco.
Okay, and this move, it places him directly in the epicenter of the Renaissance.
Literally the center of everything.
He is suddenly breathing the same air as the legendary architect Brunelleschi and the sculptor Donatello. But more dangerously, he ends up directly in the crosshairs of the Medici family.
Yeah, and the Medici essentially ruled Florence. They were a phenomenally wealthy banking dynasty.
Right.
And Cosimo de Medici takes a profound interest in the San Marco convent. He starts pouring massive amounts of money into its reconstruction and decoration.
Okay, we have to unpack this. Why is a ruthless billionaire politician so obsessed with funding a monastery for beggars?
That's a fair question.
Because in the 15th century, charging interest on loans, which is the literal foundation of the banking industry, was considered the mortal sin of usury.
Yes,
The
exactly.
Medicis were making unimaginable fortunes through a practice that the church said would send them straight to hell. So funding convents was basically, what? Spiritual money laundering.
That is pretty much it. Cosimo is buying his way out of purgatory. He was securing his soul by financing holy spaces. But Cosimo's involvement at San Marco goes a step further. He actually reserves a personal, private cell within the convent just for himself.
A billionaire with a monk's cell.
Yeah. He uses it as a spiritual retreat to escape the chaos of Florentine politics. And he commissions Angelico to decorate the entire convent, including his personal cell, with frescoes.
See, this brings us to a massive contradiction. You have the richest man in the world, a guy whose entire public persona is built on projecting terrifying levels of wealth and power,
Right.
paying a beggar to paint a room where he can pretend to be a beggar.
It is the ultimate Renaissance irony.
Totally. But artistically, this commission at San Marco is where Angelico breaks the world open.
He really does. He takes everything he learned from his miniature illuminations and completely abandons the flat Gothic style.
So no more floating cutouts.
No, he drops those heavy, solid gold backgrounds entirely. Instead, he replaces them with naturalistic landscapes and pioneers the physical mechanics of linear perspective.
Wait, how does linear perspective actually work in this context? Because, to a modern eye, we take 3D images completely for granted.
Sure. So think about standing on a long, straight road and looking at the horizon.
Okay.
The parallel edges of the road seem to converge at a single vanishing point in the distance, right?
Yeah, they meet in the middle.
Well, Angelico started mathematically organizing his paintings around these invisible vanishing points.
Oh, wow.
By doing this, he created the optical illusion of three-dimensional depth on a completely flat, two-dimensional wall.
So he forces the divine down into our physical reality. The saints are no longer hovering in a separate golden dimension. They are standing in our world.
Exactly. And this reaches its absolute peak in 1439 with the San Marco altarpiece.
Okay.
Angelico basically invents a brand new genre of religious art called the Sacra ConversazioneThe, or sacred conversation.
How is it different from what came before?
Prior to this, an altarpiece would feature the Virgin Mary in the center and various saints placed in separate, isolated wooden panels alongside her.
So they were physically disconnected from each other.
Entirely disconnected.
So the Sacra ConversazioneThe, it's essentially the moment photography shifted from stiff, formal, totally separate individual portraits to like a candid group shot where everyone is hanging out in the same room.
That is exactly what he did. He places all of these holy figures squarely on a beautiful, intricately painted carpet within a single shared architectural space.
That's incredible.
You can see the actual physical weight of their bodies beneath the heavy folds of their clothing. They were looking at each other, gesturing, interacting.
He gave the divine earthly substance.
Right. It created a sense of community among the saints that physically mirrored the community of the Dominican friars who were standing there looking at the painting.
Now, that makes perfect sense for a public altarpiece, but I keep thinking about the private cells where the monks actually slept.
Right, the frescoes in the cells.
Yeah, including Cosimo de Medici's personal retreat.
Mm-hmm.
You have a patron who loves luxury footing the bill. How does Angelico handle the interior of these cells?
He paints frescoes in these individual cells that are radically different from the public altarpieces. They're incredibly minimalist and totally unadorned.
Really? No bling?
None. Take his famous Annunciation in one of the cells. The painting literally matches the physical shape of the real window in the room.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, creating an illusion that the spiritual event is happening right there in the monk's physical space.
And there is no gold leaf, there is no expensive lapis lazuli.
None at all. The strict Dominican rule placed a massive focus on charity, humility, and contemplation. A monk's cell contained nothing but a bed, a desk, and Angelico's fresco.
And Cosimo was okay with that.
Cosimo de Medici completely respected this.
Mm.
The billionaire politician didn't demand bling in his private cell.
That's amazing.
Angelico proved that raw painterly skill, deep emotion, and careful physical gestures were enough to create a masterpiece. He didn't need the expensive trappings of wealth to communicate the divine.
So the patronage didn't corrupt the artist. He found a perfect balance. But of course, when you execute a project that perfectly in Florence, the ultimate boss takes notice. The Pope summons him.
Yeah, in 1445, Pope Eugene V calls Angelico to Rome to paint frescoes at St. Peter's. And later, he works for Pope Nicholas V.
Right.
He was tasked with designing the frescoes for the Nicholene Chapel and the Vatican.
Just think about the pressure here. You get the biggest promotion of your life. You move from the quiet, minimalist walls of a monk's cell to the literal epicenter of global power.
It's a massive shift.
The Vatican demands spectacle. They want lavishness. They want a blockbuster.
They absolutely do.
It's like a minimalist acoustic musician suddenly being forced to play with a massive 50-piece orchestra. The challenge isn't just dealing with the sheer volume of the noise. It's figuring out how to keep the raw, intimate emotion of your acoustic set when you are suddenly backed by a wall of golden trumpets and like explosive visual effects.
That is the perfect analogy. The visual demands of the Vatican were the polar opposite of San Marco. The Nicholene Chapel is often described by art historians as looking like a jewel box.
Right, because of all the expensive material.
Exactly. Angelico was forced to return to using brilliant blues and incredibly heavy layers of gold leaf to project the majesty of the papacy.
Let's talk about those brilliant blues, actually, because it wasn't just a matter of picking a different tube of paint.
Oh no. The color they demanded was ultramarine, which was made by taking lapis lazuli, a semi-precious stone imported all the way from the mountains of Afghanistan, and painstakingly grinding it down by hand into a fine powder.
Just massive amounts of manual labor.
Yes, and then purifying it. It was incredibly labor-intensive to produce, and honestly, it cost more per ounce than actual gold.
Wow. So the Pope was basically making a profound statement of wealth by covering the walls in it.
Precisely.
But does this force Angelico to compromise? I mean, he just spent years in Florence stripping away all this decorative distraction to focus on human emotion and natural perspective.
Right?
Now the Pope is handing him buckets of crushed gemstones and demanding a spectacle. Does he lose his soul in the bling?
You know, the brilliance of Fra Angelico is how he synthesized these two opposing forces.
How so?
He took the heavy gold and the staggering expense of the lapis lazuli demanded by the Pope, but he refused to abandon his intense focus on humanity and piety.
That is a tough tightrope to walk.
It is. The famous Renaissance art historian Giorgio Vasari noted that even dripping in gold, the saints painted by Angelico came nearer to the truth of human emotion than the figures done by any other artist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he brought his groundbreaking realistic portraiture right into that lavish Vatican setting.
So he pulls off the impossible. He satisfies the Pope's demand for a visual jewel box while keeping his own spiritual and artistic integrity completely intact.
He really did. He didn't let the budget swallow the message.
That's incredible.
And he was heavily assisted in Rome by his brilliant pupil, Benozzo Gozzoli,
Okay, Gozzoli.
who helped execute these massive grand designs without losing that core emotional truth. Because, you know, Angelico's internal devotion was legendary.
Right, he was deeply spiritual.
He reportedly never retouched or altered a painting once it was done, believing that his initial brushstrokes were divinely guided.
Wait, never retouched. That's intense.
Yeah. He would pray before handling a brush, and historical accounts claimed he wept openly while painting the crucifixion.
Wow. Well, that level of piety is probably what fueled a major historical myth about his time in Rome, right?
Right, yes. The Archbishop.
Yeah. The story goes that Pope Nicholas V was so blown away by Angelico's holiness that he offered him the job of Archbishop of Florence. And Angelico, being the humble monk, supposedly rejects this massive promotion.
It is a great story, but the historical timeline completely shatters it.
Because the dates don't match up.
Exactly. Angelico was summoned to Rome in 1445 by Pope Eugene V. Nicholas V wasn't even elected pope until March 1447.
Huh.
And the man who actually became the Archbishop of Florence during that specific period was another Dominican friar named Antoninus of Florence.
I love it when basic calendar math ruins a good myth.
It always does.
But, you know, even without the archbishop title, his influence was undeniable. He eventually returns to his convent in Fiesole, becomes prior, and dies in Rome in 1455.
Right.
But his physical death is just the beginning of his legacy. I mean, we can trace his specific artistic DNA straight to the most famous ceiling in the history of the world.
Oh, the lineage is direct.
Walk us through it.
Okay, so Angelico teaches Benozzo Gozzoli. Gozzoli then heavily influences a Florentine painter named Domenico Ghirlandaio.
Okay.
And Ghirlandaio goes on to run a massive workshop where he becomes the primary teacher of a young artist named Michelangelo.
Michelangelo, the man who paints the Sistine Chapel.
Yes. When Michelangelo climbs up on that scaffolding to paint the Sistine Chapel, he is acting as a direct artistic descendant of Fra Angelico.
That is wild.
Think about the style Michelangelo uses. He relies on unadorned fresco techniques. He uses incredibly clear, distinct colors. He focuses heavily on the careful arrangement of bodies and deeply emotional physical gestures.
Right, prioritizing the human form.
Exactly. He prioritizes raw expression over flashy decorative wealth. That entire philosophy traces its roots directly back to Angelico's quiet, minimalist cells in San Marco.
It is an incredible legacy. But the story of Fra Angelico's actual physical art doesn't just stay neatly preserved in museums.
Oh, not at all.
It plays out like a modern-day treasure hunt, specifically involving that revolutionary painting we talked about earlier, the San Marco altarpiece.
The one that invented the Sacra Conversazione in 1439.
Yes, the masterpiece that physically brought the divine down to earth.
Right. Well, it did not survive history intact.
What happened to it?
During the early 1800s, Napoleon was marching his armies through Italy on his military campaigns. And during the chaos and the looting, the San Marco altarpiece was completely dismantled.
Oh, man.
Parts of it were dispersed, and 8 of the smaller side panels simply vanished into the shuffle of history.
They just disappear. I mean, how does a piece of a masterpiece just vanish?
It basically comes down to a concept called provenance, which is the documented history of ownership for a piece of art. During wars or massive social upheavals, that chain of documentation gets severed. A painting is stolen, sold on the black market, or traded, and suddenly no one knows who painted it.
So it loses its identity.
Completely. It loses its context. It just becomes an old piece of painted wood.
Which brings us to a mind-boggling discovery in the modern era. Walk us through what happened in California in 1965.
Okay, so in 1965, an amateur art collector in California named Garrison Preston was browsing an estate sale.
Just a random estate sale.
Yeah, and he purchased 2 small wooden panels depicting some Dominican saints. The auction catalog simply listed them as panel paintings of Dominican saints, 15th century Italian.
Okay, so totally generic.
Very. He bought them from the estate of an American widow whose husband had died in Switzerland decades earlier.
Do we know how much he paid for them?
He paid roughly $200 to $400 for the pair.
Oh my goodness.
A very modest sum, even for the 1960s. Anyway, Garrison Preston eventually passes away, and his daughter, Jean Preston, inherits the panels.
And what does she do with them?
Well, Jean actually happened to be an expert in medieval manuscripts, working as a curator at the Huntington Library in Princeton. But even with her trained eye, she didn't fully realize what was hanging on her wall.
Wait, so she just hangs them up in her house?
Yep. She moved to Oxford, England, and hung these 2 small wooden panels in the spare bedroom of her house.
You're kidding.
No, they just sat there, behind the door, for decades.
A piece of a missing Renaissance masterpiece is just sitting in a guest room in Oxford. I mean, how did anyone finally figure out what they were?
In the mid-2000s, an art historian named Michael Liversidge visited Jean Preston's house to evaluate her collection.
Okay.
He walked into that spare bedroom, looked behind the door, and recognized them almost immediately. He called it a once-in-a-lifetime find.
I can't even imagine that moment.
Right. By analyzing the painting style, the specific tools used to punch patterns into the halos, and the exact dimensions of the wood, experts confirmed his suspicion. These weren't just random 15th century paintings. They were 2 of the missing side panels from Fra Angelico's San Marco altarpiece.
The exact panels looted during Napoleon's campaigns over 2 centuries earlier.
The very same one.
That is wild. And Jean Preston passed away in 2006, right? And her estate was auctioned off in 2007.
Yes.
And the panels that her father bought for $400 sparked a massive international bidding war. A Florentine antiquarian outbid the Italian government and purchased them for 1.7 million British pounds.
Quite the return on investment.
Unbelievable. And they were eventually bought by a museum foundation and returned to the San Marco Museum in Florence. But this incredible leap in price really forces you to ask a fundamental question about art.
How so?
Well, the physical paint and the wood didn't change at all between 1965 and 2007. So does this change how we view the objective value of art? I mean, for 40 years, it was just a $400 decoration in a guest room.
Yeah, it reveals how much of an object's value is tied to its context and its creator. When a piece of art is disconnected from the genius who made it, the financial market treats it as ordinary.
Even if its aesthetic beauty is identical.
Exactly. Provenance is everything. Once those dots were connected, once the art world realized those specific brushstrokes were made by a weeping, praying Fra Angelico for the Medici family, the true historical, cultural, and financial weight was instantly restored.
It's amazing.
Piecing a fragmented masterpiece back together centuries later is an incredibly rare miracle in art history.
Today we have explored the journey of a humble friar born around 1395 who managed to bridge the enormous gap between the medieval Gothic world and the explosive realism of the Renaissance.
A truly pivotal figure.
He balanced the strict, bare-bones poverty of his Dominican order with the unimaginable wealth and demanding egos of his patrons, from Cosimo de Medici to the Pope.
He fundamentally changed how human beings visualize the divine. His legacy shaped masters like Michelangelo. And his life was so profoundly defined by a mix of breathtaking talent and quiet integrity that in 1982, Pope John Paul II officially beatified him, later naming him the patron saint of Catholic artists.
He achieved the absolute highest fame possible in his era. He worked for the most powerful men in the known world. Yet, the epitaph carved into his marble tomb in Rome reveals exactly how he viewed his own life.
It is a beautiful sentiment.
It basically says, "Don't praise me for being a great artist. Praise me, rather, because in the name of Christ I gave all I had to the poor. The deeds that count on earth are not the ones that count in heaven."
He wanted to be remembered solely for his quiet humility, not his monumental talent.
So as you go about your week, navigating the demands of your own career, your boss's expectations, and the pressure to succeed, ask yourself, what is your gold leaf? The flashy, impressive, expensive thing the world sees you for.
Right.
And what is your unadorned fresco? The quiet, private, behind-the-scenes work that actually defines who you really are.